In 1938, a sheriff walks into a small bar in Elmendorf, Texas, looking for answers. The owner, Joe Ball, has a reputation. He keeps several live alligators in a concrete pit behind the tavern. He charges people to watch him throw meat to them. But lately, it isn't the gators that have people talking, it's the women. A waitress goes missing, then another. A girlfriend, a local woman last seen in Joe's car. Every rumor ends in the same place, the pit out back. The sheriff starts to question him. Before he can finish, Joe Ball reaches for a gun and shoots himself in the head. No confession, no trial, just a dead man in an alligator pit in a town where too many women have vanished. While Texas is trying to make sense of that, a German city is gripped by a very different kind of fear. In Düsseldorf, children and women are being attacked on dark streets by an unknown man the papers call the vampire. He seems to enjoy reading about his own crimes almost as much as committing them. And in America, a quiet, gray-haired man named Albert Fish convinces a family to let him take their daughter to a birthday party. She never comes home. Years later, the parents receive a letter explaining in graphic detail what he claims to have done to her. These aren't legends. They're real cases from the late 1920s and 1930s. 3 killers in 3 different countries whose crimes were so disturbing that they still show up in true crime books a century later. In this video, we're going straight into their stories, how they operated, what they did, and how they were finally stopped. Let's start where we began. In a Texas bar with a man and his alligators. Joe Ball, the Alligator Man. Elmendorf, Texas, in the 1930s is small, hot, and rough around the edges. Work is scarce, money is tight, and people drink where they can. One place that's never empty is Joe Ball's bar. Joe is a tough man with a temper, but that isn't what makes him famous. His claim to fame is behind the building, a pit with live alligators. He buys them, builds a pen, and charges people to watch him feed them. Sometimes it's meat scraps, sometimes it's roadkill. He pours a drink, steps outside, throws something over the edge, and the water explodes. It's entertainment. It's also a perfect cover story for a rumor no one wants to say out loud at first. Because as the years pass, women around Joe start disappearing. One of his barmaids goes missing. Her friend, also connected to the bar, disappears not long after. A girlfriend is there one week and gone the next. A local woman is last seen getting into Joe's car. No one can say exactly what happened, but the pattern is hard to ignore. In a town this small, people notice when familiar faces just vanish. They trade stories quietly at kitchen tables. Each time, the same thought comes up. If Joe Ball wanted to get rid of a body, he wouldn't have to dig a grave. Eventually, the rumors grow loud enough that law enforcement has to act. They investigate missing women. They look at who they knew. Joe's name keeps coming up. By 1938, a sheriff finally walks into Joe's bar, prepared to confront him properly. He isn't there for a drink. He wants answers. He starts asking about the women, about the rumors, about the gator pit. Joe doesn't argue. He doesn't deny. He doesn't run. He simply pulls out a handgun, puts it to his head, and pulls the trigger. 1 second of violence. Decades of questions. There is no written confession from Joe Ball. There is no list of victims. Authorities at the time believed he killed multiple women, and locals were convinced the alligators were part of the disposal. But this is the 1930s. There's no DNA, no cadaver dogs in rural Texas, no ground-penetrating radar. If bones ever sat at the bottom of that pit, they were never properly recovered or tested. Today, historians consider Joe Ball a probable serial killer whose exact body count we'll never know. From a single bar in Texas, we moved to a city in Germany where the killer didn't hide his crimes. He let the entire city feel them. Peter Kürten, the vampire of Düsseldorf. In the late 1920s and early 1930s, Düsseldorf is still recovering from World War I. It's an industrial city with busy streets, tram lines, and workers trying to rebuild their lives. And then, seemingly at random, attacks begin. A young girl is found murdered. A woman is assaulted and stabbed on her way home. Another child is attacked. Some victims survive, others don't. The details are brutal. Several victims are stabbed multiple times. Some show signs of sexual violence. In certain cases, the killer appears to have taken pleasure in the blood itself. Newspapers pick up the story and assign a name that will stick forever. Der Vampir von Düsseldorf. The Vampire of Düsseldorf. The nickname is dramatic, but the fear it describes is very real. People start to change their habits. Women avoid walking alone at night. Parents warn their children to stay in groups. The idea that a predator could strike anywhere, on a bridge, in a park, in a quiet street, hangs over the city. What makes it worse is that the killer seems to follow the coverage. Later accounts suggest that Peter Kürten, the man behind the attacks, read the stories about himself. He watched as the city panicked. In a twisted way, the fear became part of the payoff. For the police, this is a nightmare case. They're under pressure from the public and the press. They receive false leads, confessions from disturbed individuals who had nothing to do with the crimes, and endless speculation. Kürten, meanwhile, continues to live an outwardly ordinary life. He isn't some wild figure hiding in the woods. He's a man who blends in, who can smile, talk, ride a tram, and then disappear into the night. The turning point comes in 1930 when one of Kürten's intended victims survives. A woman escapes an attack and goes to the police. She gives them a description. Her testimony is different from vague rumors. This is concrete, detailed, firsthand. Then she does something incredibly brave. At the request of the authorities, she agrees to help catch him. She sets up a meeting with Kürten, pretending to go along with him. Police quietly watch. When he arrives, they finally have what they've been missing: a real, living suspect linked directly to a surviving victim. He is arrested. In custody, Peter Kürten doesn't behave like a ranting madman. He talks. He gives long, detailed confessions. He describes his attacks, his impulses, his fascination with the panic he caused. It's chilling because he is self-aware. He understands the horror of what he did, and that doesn't stop him from talking about it in almost analytical terms. In 1931, after a high-profile trial, Kürten is sentenced to death and executed by guillotine. But even after his execution, curiosity about him doesn't completely fade. His head is preserved for study by researchers who hope to find some physical sign of what made him the way he was. They never find a simple answer. The Vampire of Düsseldorf becomes one of the earliest, well-documented examples of a modern urban serial killer, a man who used a growing city and a hungry press as the backdrop to his crimes. Our final case is quieter, more intimate, and in many ways even more disturbing because this killer didn't stalk crowded streets. He knocked at the door and was invited in.
Albert Fish, the Gray Man.
In early 20th century New York, families are packed into small apartments. Work is hard. Children play in stairwells, on streets, wherever there's space. Among the many older, gray-haired men who drift through the city is one named Albert Fish. He looks like nobody special. Thin, quiet, polite. He writes letters. He does odd jobs. He doesn't stand out. But under that appearance is a history of severe mental disturbance and sadistic fantasies that will only come fully to light at the end of his life. The case that finally exposes him begins in 1928 with the Budd family. Albert Fish approaches them under a fake name, posing as a respectable employer. He tells them he has a job for their teenage son on a farm outside the city. Decent pay, room and board, a chance at something better. The Budds are not wealthy. This offer sounds like hope. Fish visits the family, talks with them, gains their trust. During these visits, his attention drifts from the son to their young daughter, Grace Budd. He invites Grace to what he calls a birthday party. He tells her parents it will be a simple, harmless outing, and that he'll bring her back. They see an older man, neatly dressed, calm, and kind. They let their daughter go. Grace leaves the apartment with Albert Fish and never returns. For years, her disappearance remains a mystery. The family waits for news that never comes. Police investigate but cannot trace where Fish took her. The trail goes cold. Then, in the early 1930s, long after Grace vanished, something arrives in the mail. A letter addressed to the Budd home. It is written by Albert Fish. In it, he describes, in shocking detail, what he claims to have done to their daughter. The letter is both a confession and an act of cruelty, forcing the family to confront, in words, what they had only feared in their nightmares. Even seasoned detectives struggle to read it. Parts of it are so graphic that, to this day, many summaries leave out the specifics. But as twisted as the letter is, it finally gives investigators something they can use: clues. The envelope, the writing style, and the mailing details give police enough to begin tracing it. They follow the trail through the postal system and lodging records until they find the boarding house where Albert Fish has been staying. When they confront him, Fish doesn't fight. He doesn't bolt for the door. He quietly admits that he is the man they're looking for. Under questioning, he confesses to the Grace Budd murder and talks about other crimes. Investigators and later psychiatric witnesses describe him as one of the most disturbed individuals they have ever encountered. The exact number of his victims is still unknown. Some crimes remain suspected but unproven. What is certain is that his behavior places him among the most horrific offenders in American criminal history. His trial draws intense attention, not just because of what he did, but because he looks so unthreatening. A small, gray-haired man on the stand, accused of acts almost too brutal to believe. In 1936, Albert Fish is executed in the electric chair at Sing Sing prison. After his death, his case becomes a reference point in discussions of extreme psychopathy and sadism. But for many, the most haunting artifact isn't his name or photo, it's that letter to the Budd family. A document so disturbing that some officers refuse to keep copies. Fish's story is a reminder that some of the most dangerous people are the ones who look least like monsters.
3 men, 3 countries, 3 different ways of killing. Joe Ball with his alligator pit and a trail of missing women in a small Texas town. Peter Kürten, the vampire of Düsseldorf, turning a modern city's fear into part of his crimes. Albert Fish, the gray man, hiding behind age and politeness to get close to children. They never met. They lived under different systems and different cultures, but they all exploited the blind spots of their time. Ball used isolation and weak records. Kürten used anonymity in the press. Fish used trust. When we talk about the 1930s, we usually think of depression, dictators, and war on the horizon. These cases are a reminder that even in decades defined by huge events, some of the worst horrors are carried out quietly, by individuals who look ordinary. The point of revisiting them isn't to glorify the killers. It's to understand how they operated and how they were stopped, so we can recognize similar patterns when we see them again. If you want more documentary-style breakdowns of cases like these, whether from the early 1900s or modern day, let me know which story you want next. And remember, we're usually afraid of the dangers we can see. History keeps warning us about the ones we don't.